My speech of information is on Abraham Lincoln, his contributions and achievements. Abraham Lincoln was born in humble surroundings, a one-time, a one-room log cabin with dirt floors in Hardin, now called Lowry in Kentucky. Born in a cabin in Kentucky in 1809, Lincoln grew up in the frontier Kentucky and Indiana, where he was largely self-educated with a taste for jokes, hard work, and books. According to Robert Byrne, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. Abraham Lincoln had a clear purpose of life. Served for a time as a soldier in the Black Hawk, taught himself law, and held a seat in the Illinois state legislature as a Whig politician in the 1830s and 1840s. He moved to the U.S. House of Reps, where he voiced his opposition to the U.S. war with Mexico. In the mid-50s, Lincoln left the Whig Party to join the new uh, nation, to the new Republican Party. In 1858, he went up against one of the most popular politicians in the nation in the name of Senator Stephen Douglas in a contest for the U.S. Senate. Though Lincoln lost in the election, his flair in what Barbaros will call a life without cause is a life without effect saw his spectacular performance against Douglas in a series of nationally covered debates which made him a contender for the 1860s Republican presidential nomination. Lincoln became the 16th President of the United States in 1860. On April 14, 1865, Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater in Washington by John Wilkes Booth. Wilkes Booth was an actor who somehow thought he was helping the South and killed by assassins' bullets. Less than a week after the surrender of Confederate forces, Lincoln left the nation a more perfect union and thereby earned the admiration of most Americans as the country's greatest president. He was nicknamed Honest Abbey and Illinois Rail Splitter. His contribution includes preservation of the Union through the most devastating experience in history, that is the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, and the Emancipation Proclamation. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in about 1860, 7 slave states left the Union to form the Confederate States of America, and 4 more joined when hostilities began between the North and the South. In what seemed like Alice Roosevelt Longworth said in her philosophy, "Fill what's empty, empty what's full, scratch where it itches." A bloody civil war then engulfed the nation as Lincoln vowed to preserve the Union, enforce the laws of the United States, and end secession. The war lasted about 4 years, and with a staggering loss of about 600,000 lives, in American lives. In this is in line with my attributes of war, which says no one goes to war for fear of loss of lives. Lincoln was noted for very vigorous measures, sometimes at odds with the ideas of his military commander. Politics was Lincoln's major preoccupation in the presidency, and Lincoln tried, throughout the war to keep Republican Party together. Never favored, anybody or any faction or any party. And President Lincoln led the Union as the commander in chief during the Civil War. He vowed to preserve the Union even if it meant war, which goes with the saying by Grandma Morse, life is what makes it, always has been, and always will be. He eventually raised an army of over 2 million soldiers in pursuing victory. Lincoln assumed extravagant powers over the press, declared laws, martial laws in areas where no military action justified it. And no president in history had ever exerted so much executive authority, but he did so for personal power, but not in order to preserve the Union, not for personal power, but in order to preserve the Union. In 1864, uh, an example of his limited personal ambitions, Lincoln refused to call off national elections, preferring to hold the election even though he stood a chance of losing the election. And eventually, in a spectacular victory of Union troops in General Sherman's capture of Atlanta, Lincoln was decisively re-elected. About 4 months after the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln joined in a dedication of National Cemetery on portion of the battlefield. The speech he delivered that day would become one of the most famous speeches given by a U.S. president. Lincoln never let the world forget that the Civil War involved even larger issues. This is stated most movingly in dedicating the military cemetery at Gettysburg, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish, from the earth. And, and Lincoln was resolved in his campaign for president. He clearly expressed his opposition to slavery and his determination to limit the expansion of slavery westward into the new territories acquired from Mexico in 1850. His election victory created a crisis for the nation, as many Southern Democrats feared that he would just be it would just be a matter of time, before Lincoln would declare would kill slavery in the South. What started as a war to preserve the Union, and vindicated democracy, became a battle for freedom, war, and to end slavery when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863. It will be recalled that the Emancipation Proclamation is very historic. Afterwards, he was quoted as saying, "And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice warranted by the Constitution, upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God." This is his historic statement after the proclamation of emancipation. Although the proclamation did not free all the slaves in the nation, but no slaves outside the Confederacy were affected by the proclamation. It was an important symbolic gesture, uh, which was uh, which was identified uh, by the end of the war. Nearly 200,000 African Americans had fought, during the Union cause, and Lincoln referred to them as indispensable in ensuring Union victory. The Emancipation Proclamation that on the first day of January, people whereof shall be on the rebellion against the United States, including the military and the naval authorities thereof. In conclusion, citing to be, by biblical terms on Ecclesiasticus chapter 9, verse 10, whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge of wisdom. Lincoln today is remembered for his character and leadership. His speeches, as a man of humble origins, whose determination and perseverance led him to the nation's highest